All right, folks, so this is going to be a screencast of a single slide here in the interest group presentation, but there's actually a lot of information. There's a lot of good information in your textbook. So the goal here is to talk about the types of interest groups that you encounter. Now, if there's only 4 types, you should be able to identify those types and know examples of them. The hard part is that almost every one of these types can be further broken down into more specific examples. So the first thing you need to understand is that these types, basically the 4 different types, are there because they provide a different benefit for this group. So the question always is, what is the interest group trying to provide for its members? Okay, is it an economic benefit? So we're looking at pocketbook issues then. So when we get to that first interest group, economic interest groups, we're really looking at interest groups that provide an economic benefit, that are interested in the pocketbook issues of their membership. And it might be like high wages or maintaining benefits or lowering tax rates or providing less or more favorable regulations for your industry. So when you look specifically at economic interest groups, there are different types. There's corporation and business associations. Now, those are the most numerous interest group out there and the most powerful interest groups out there. You're talking about like the Chamber of Commerce, which is a collection of a lot of different industries, from like mom and pop businesses to larger businesses that are advocating for policy and regulations that allow them to have more favorable rules in the marketplace to make it easier for them to do business. Or they could be organized along just a particular industry, like the Tobacco Institute is really just interested in tobacco. Okay? Now, also within the economic interest group category of type there, you're going to have unions and professional associations. So the largest one is going to be your AFL-CIO, which is, again, a collection of a lot of different unionized groups, right? However, you might have ones that are aligned along a particular industry, like Education Minnesota, which is teachers. You might have a police union or a firefighters union. You also, within this subcategory of economic interest groups, you have professional associations. So like the American Medical Association, which is an association for doctors, and the economic interest that they're often concerned about is malpractice awards and lowering the dollar amount that you might be able to make by suing a doctor for malpractice. But you're also going to have, American Bar Association, which is a professional association for lawyers. Okay? All right. Now let's move on to the next type here. You got economic opportunity interest groups. So the benefit that they're trying to provide for their memberships is the assurance of civil rights. You're talking about groups that historically might have experienced a discrimination or are still being treated differently on the basis of age, race, gender, sexual orientation. So when we look at particular groups like age, you're looking at the American Association for Retired Persons, okay? And so they advocate for the interests of people over 65. You might have, if you're looking at an economic opportunity interest groups organized on the basis of race, you got the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, right? And that one's a historical organization that goes all the way back to the early 20th century and had a huge role in advancing civil rights in our country. Okay. And then you have economic opportunity interest groups organized around gender, such as the National Organization for Women, around sexual orientation, so the National LGBTQ Task Force. You also, when you're talking about equal opportunity interest groups, you're talking about interest groups that are more likely to use less conventional means to exercise pressure on whether it's Congress or whether it's the bureaucracy to do something to advocate for, the protection of civil rights. So they're more likely to engage in protests and sit-ins and demonstrations. And sometimes they might not be classified as a traditional interest group itself and more a social movement. So you look at Black Lives Matter or the hashtag Me Too movement. All right. Let's move on to the next one here, public interest groups. Now, public interest groups are interesting, okay, because their goal is to provide a public benefit for people, for more people than just their members, Okay, so they're looking for they're advocating for government to provide an invisible good or a collective good. So a good that's actually owned by government, or a good that is, once it's provided, everybody has access to, such as like clean air. Again, public interest groups can be broken down into a variety of types. So when you talk about environmental interest groups, such as the Sierra Club, that's going to be a public interest group. When you talk about consumer groups that are advocating for the rights of consumers, such as the Consumer Union, which publishes consumer reports, that's a type of public interest group. We talk about religious groups, such as the Christian Coalition, and is advocating for the rights of people that practice religion. It's a public interest group. Your Second Amendment groups, whether they're the National Rifle Association, that is, advocating for people's Second Amendment rights, or a handgun control group, which is advocating for a limit on people's Second Amendment rights. Those are both classified as public interest groups. Even reproductive rights groups are under this particular category. So you have Planned Parenthood, and then on the opposite end of the spectrum, the National Right to Life Council would be considered public interest groups, because they're advocating for a public benefit or the security of a right that, once granted, is going to be available for, everybody. So when you get deeper into the study of interest groups and you start, recognizing the free rider problem, it's the public interest groups that really have to deal with the free rider problem. People just kind of going along and reaping the benefit of what that particular interest group is trying to provide, without doing the hard work of joining and providing money to the group. All right, let's get on to, so ACLU is probably your last type. So they're not like organized around a particular right. They're just organized around making sure that government isn't encroaching on all of your rights. They tend to be nonpartisan, okay, because they will advocate for all different rights for all different groups of people. And then finally, our last type here, government interest groups. So that's, if you think of them as foreign governments lobbying our national government for better trade deals, that's it. You're in the right camp, right? So like various countries around the world will actually have an interest group that lobbies our national government when it comes to trade deals. Makes sense, right? However, we also know that we're a federal system. And really, since the onset of cooperative federalism, and you talk about how the national government is setting goals and the state governments are being coerced into helping achieve those goals, both state and local governments have formed interest groups to lobby the national government, maybe to pressure them into providing more block grants versus categorical grants. So you have, lower levels of government are also forming interest groups that can be categorized as that fourth and final type there, government interest groups. All right, so there you go. There's a little explanation. Reading the textbook will definitely provide you more information and insight. Talk to you all later.